One of the biggest challenges today isn't a lack of information, it's keeping up with all the information that we do have. Every single day, we're bombarded with emails, text messages, Facebook messages, Instagram DMs, Teams and Slack notifications, and enough push notifications to make a Las Vegas slot machine seem quiet and reasonable. And for me, one of the biggest challenges is school communications. Every week, there are emails about events and schedules and permission slips and field trips and tests and about 17 other things that I'm all supposed to keep track of. A few months ago, about 10 minutes before my daughter was supposed to catch the bus, she informs me that she needed her choir shirt. When I asked her which one, she just kind of shrugged her shoulders. Right now, in fairness to the school, they had sent me an email about this and a reminder of the reminder. But, while I'm sitting there frantically searching my inbox trying to find this before my daughter's bus shows up, I had the thought, I'm an automation engineer. I do this for a living. I've spent years building systems that take thousands of events and distill them down into a handful of useful information. So why not do the same for myself? And that's exactly what I did. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. Now, you may not even have kids in school, but the information that we're going to go over would be useful in any situation where you have a lot of information and you need to extract out dates, times, and events. So today I'm going to show you how I solve this using very little code. We're actually going to use N8N and build an AI agent that will go through and parse this information for us and send us a nice consolidated email. So whether it's school, sports, your job, what have you, this process would be exactly the same no matter what. Now, this isn't going to be an N8N tutorial. I'm going to use N8N to build this solution, but the real goal isn't to learn where to click or how to configure a specific node. The goal is to walk through the thought process on how to turn a flood of information into something useful using agentic AI, starting small and working your way up to a fully fledged solution. The same ideas can be implemented in Power Automate, Zapier, PowerShell, Python, whatever your tool of choice happens to be. Today, it just happens to be N8N. If you do decide that you want to use N8N, there are plenty of tutorials out there to help you, and I'll even link to some in the description below. So, as I mentioned, I get a flood of emails from the school. I actually take all of the emails and forward them to one centralized inbox. That way I have one centralized place where I can go and look for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect to that inbox using N8N to pull that information back and then feed that into an agentic agent, starting with Olama. And spoiler alert, we will change that to a more powerful one as we go along, and then generate a weekly summary of the concise information that I need to know for that upcoming week. So here's a look at the inbox that I get. And what you're seeing here is about a week's worth of emails. Now, some of the emails look like this one and are pretty straightforward, pretty easy to read, nice bulleted list with our dates in it. Other ones look like this one. Tons of information scattered throughout all of this. And to be honest with you, I'm not reading all of that, which is where our N8N workflow is going to come in to play. So I'm in the N8N console, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new workflow. I'm going to call this one Get School Events, and then we'll start with a simple manual trigger. That way we can just run it whenever we want for our testing purposes. Now, obviously, the first thing I need to do is get the emails. So I'm going to use the Get Many Messages. As I mentioned before, this isn't going to be an N8N tutorial, so I'm not going to cover how to create the credential objects and doing all the permissions and everything on the Gmail side. Again, resources and links to that down in the description. What we're concerned with here is actually creating the workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the school label that I've created inside of Gmail. So whenever something comes in from a school email address, it automatically gets marked as school. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add a simple date filter on here because I only need things from the past week. Well, we can run this every Sunday to send me this consolidated email. So just a simple now minus 7 days. Now, when I go ahead and run this, I see it brings back all the items from inside my inbox. Now, the one thing that you may notice here is that it's actually only returning a snippet of the email. I need the full email. So I'm going to turn simplified off. However, doing that opens another problem. As you can see here, it returned the HTML of the email. So if there's things like pictures and all these other type of stuff in there, these messages can get very long very quickly. So we'll take a look next at how to handle that situation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract HTML content. So for each one of those emails that comes in, I can grab the JSON HTML, which is the field that is inside this return here that you see. And then our key is just going to be the text. And then I'm going to tell it to go ahead and just return the body. And then I'll even tell it to skip images, because what you'll see in Gmail is that an image will get transposed into a base 64, and that's where those huge long messages come from. So as you see now, nice, clean, text-only messages. The /ns are just line breaks. So now we have our emails, and we are able to extract the text directly from them. Now we can go ahead and feed that into our AI agent. The big part of this is the prompt. I started with a fairly simple prompt here. Right? You're an assistant that extracts important school-related dates and deadlines from emails. Analyze the emails below, identify any important dates that parents need to be aware of. And then I'll list a bunch of different examples. Obviously, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's enough to give the AI an idea of what it needs to look for. And now I tell it, return only valid text in this format. Right? I want the date, and then a short description of the event. And then give it some additional rules around data validation, things like that. If it can't figure out what the year is, to use the current year, those type of things. And then ensuring that it returns text only. Then what I need to do is actually feed into it the text of the email that we extracted from the previous step. And what this is going to do is actually going to run once per email. It can cause a lot of problems if you try to shove all of that data in there at once. So it gets pretty confused. So found it best to just feed it in one at a time. Next, I'm going to go ahead and attach a local Olama instance that I have running, and then tell it to go ahead and process. And then it comes back with all of our responses. So it went through, it discovered these certain items in there on these certain dates and built that out into our text file. Now, if you notice, it returned 6 items here, right? So it returns 1 for each email that it found. I only brought over 6 emails. So what I can do is I can actually use JavaScript to consolidate these down into one string that I can then send via an email. And full disclosure, I haven't messed with JavaScript in 10 years, right? So what I did is I went ahead and just copied the results JSON directly from within N8N. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up ChatGPT. Tell it, hey, I want to flatten this information into a single string using JavaScript in N8N, and then literally paste it in my response string. And you can see here, there's some nice JavaScript that it gives us. It even gives you multiple options on different ways if you want to exclude nulls and things like that. At this point, we want to keep everything. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to use this first one that we have here and paste this directly in here. So our output here maps to the output from the AI agent. And then we're just going ahead and we're joining it all together. And then we ensure that our mode is set to run once for all items. That way we only get one return. And we see here our return text that is all consolidated together. As you notice, we went from 6 items to 1 item. So we consolidate all of those together into one so that we can send one consolidated email, because that's our end goal here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the Gmail and then send a message. And go ahead and add the information about the email, where to send it, subject line, and our email type is going to be text because we just have plain text here. And when we put this in here, we'll see exactly what our data is going to look like inside of our email. So as we can see, it lists out each day that it found and puts it in here. Now, you may notice, 1, these dates are not in order, and 2, they're kind of all over the place, right? So 6/17, there's 2 of them right there at the very top. They're not consolidated. So I think we can do a little bit better. Let's go back and revisit our AI agent and see if we can't get this data to be a little bit cleaner. So let's go back and add a little bit more information to this prompt. Instead of just telling it to analyze this email, right, we can give it a little more detail, right? Tell it to ignore things like HTML tags, or scripts, or metadata, or unsubscribe links, privacy notices, all those type of things. We want to extract only visible message content meant for parents. And we're going to tell it to return only valid JSON. So instead of just having a regular text field, we're going to actually do JSON. We're also going to tell it, don't describe the email templates, don't ask for additional information. We just want these dates and the description of what we want in here. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to feed it in the JSON structure that I want it to use. So for each email, find all the important dates in there, right? So there's multiple dates. I need to make sure that all of those come through. So feed that through as an array, give me every date, and then even give me a title, a type, and if parent action is required, if I actually need to do something or if I just need to know about it. Next, I'm going to feed it some very specific output rules to make sure that it's only returning the JSON that I want and nothing else. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in the email body and subject this time. Now, to get the subject, we're going to need to go back up to the school messages and then drag the specific subject down into here. So now that we've got our updated prompt, let's go ahead and test it out. we got our data, but one thing you may notice here is that this is not properly formed JSON. And what's happening is that I'm actually running out of memory on my local Olama instance trying to run this. So I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to switch it over to OpenAI, connect it to my OpenAI account, and then go ahead and run it again. Now we see that we have fully formed JSON. So OpenAI was able to handle this much better than a local Olama. And that's the great thing about this solution. I can literally just come in here and click on different models and add them in as needed. Now, if we look at our JavaScript to consolidate everything together, we notice that it consolidates all the JSON into one giant ugly JSON string. Not really what we want. So what I did is I went ahead and fed that output back into ChatGPT again and said, hey, give me some JavaScript that will go through and group these together by the dates and then sort the dates and then give me a list underneath each date of everything that we have. So that's what this is doing. We're getting our title, then we're saying if action is required, go ahead and add a big action required on there for me. And now we run this and we have our plain text again. Now we can go ahead and we can see what that looks like inside of the email. We just have to change our results to the new email body. But now as we see, each date is in order and it contains a list of all the things underneath that date. So if there's more than one thing on that date, it's going to list them on there. So initially, this is where I left it. I set it to run every Sunday afternoon and send my wife and I an email. The very first week, my wife came back and said, that's awesome. Can you have it make calendar events so that I get a notification on my phone before everything comes in? And I thought, sure, why not? So went back in to here, and in order to create a calendar event, I'm going to need the time. I'm just going ahead and going to update my JSON and say, hey, give me a time, and add a couple rules in here about the time, where we're going to convert it to hours and minutes, and then if it can't determine the time, we'll just default it to 7 a.m. That way we know pretty much at the beginning of our day we're going to have that event, and that's it. Add those 2 lines to the prompt, and now if we look at our output data, we can see it grabbing the time and putting it in there. So what we can do is I'm actually going to create a second path for this to be able to take. Because when I'm creating events, I don't want them consolidated, right? I want to create one event for each item that is going to be on the calendar. So in this case, I'm not going to have my JavaScript joined in together. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to have my JavaScript go and look at the output and say, is parent action required? If it is, and there's a date on there, then and only then are you going to create an output. And then we're going to return all of those results as individual results, not as a consolidated report. And now we can see here's all of our dates, times, titles, parent action. So these are the ones that I know I can go and I can create a calendar event for. So as you see, we actually have 10 items coming off of here, right? Because some emails had multiple dates inside of them. We ended up with more than we actually did in the number of emails, which is to be expected. But now I'm just go ahead and I'm going to create an event for each one. Our event's going to be event. And then I went ahead and I already created a shared calendar called school, so that my wife and I both have this in our hooked to our email accounts. And now what I need to do is I actually need to set the time for it to start. Right? By default, it just goes to now. Well, that's not going to do me any good. I want to know when the actual event is going to take place. So some basic JavaScript, and a lot of this is, using IntelliSense from in here. I can see that I'm just going to tell it that I want a date time from ISO, and you can see it's building out the date. All right, so we have the date. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add the time. So there we are. We see our date and our time of 7 a.m. minus 4 hours, because that's my time zone. And you can see as I scroll through these, it changes different times based upon what was returned. Some, there's one here is at 12:30, others are at 7 a.m. because they couldn't determine. Now I'm just going to copy and paste this down here into the end. And then at the end, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm just going to default everything to an hour, right? So whatever time it started plus 1 hour, I can go through and I can adjust those times as needed later on. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add in any of the actions that I need to do into the description and then give it the title. Now, one other thing I needed to do is the default reminders in Google Calendar is like 10 minutes before via email, right? And the whole purpose of this is to get rid of emails. So I'm turning off the default reminders and I'm going to set a pop-up so that it just shows up on my phone. Hey, these are the things you're going to have to do. Now, what I want to go ahead and do, I want all reminders to show me at 5 p.m. the day before. So again, just some basic JavaScript where I take the date and time, then I find the difference. Right, so then I'm just going to take the date again, set it manually to 5 p.m., and then subtract the date from it, and then subtract those 2 dates, and that gives me the number of minutes. As you can see up here, I get the number of minutes back to 5 p.m. the previous day. So if my event was at 12:30 on a Tuesday, it is going to notify me at 5 p.m. on Monday. If it's at 9 o'clock at night on Tuesday, it's still just going to remind me at 5 p.m. that Monday, that previous day. And now, if I click quick enough, we can actually see these get created in real time. And you can see all of our data and all of our information was put directly into each one of these. I even have that she must wear her blue shirt with dark bottoms. So that morning, I know exactly what it is that she needs to wear. Now, one issue I ran into with this is that emails would come in at the beginning or the middle of the week for things that needed to be done later in the week, which wasn't too hard to keep up with when I was just doing that consolidated email that ran once a week on Sundays, and it would just write that information in there and send it to us. Now that we're creating these calendar events, I want to go ahead, I'm going to run it every day. So it would say like 4 o'clock every day, go ahead and run and find anything that I need to know about. So I'm not going to miss anything. The problem is it's going to keep reading those same emails over and over and over again. It's just going to keep creating all sorts of different calendar events and things like that. I could do a bunch of crazy logic in here to say if an event with this title and this name already exists, but that's assuming that the AI agent every single time is going to return the same name and everything like that. So instead, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a label to these messages. So I'm going to break off a third row here. And by breaking these off in the rows, these just assure that every single one kind of just follows its own path and nothing's going to interfere with any of the other items. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to tell it every email that processed, go ahead and add the school-processed tag to it so that I know that it came through. So going back to our original get school messages, I'm going to tell that to now mark those as processed. Now what I also need to do is now tell the get school messages to not include ones with that add process label. So if I go back into the get school messages, you can see here where I have the label filter. We have the school and we have the school processed, but there is no negative filter on this. So there's not a way for me to say here, definitively do not include the school processed, but it does support fully standard Gmail search queries. So instead of just using the built-in dropdowns here, I'm just going to go ahead and add the label of school. So it's going to return any with the school label, which is being done automatically by Gmail. And then I'm going to say minus label school dash processed. So that says anything that is school but is not school processed, go ahead and return that. So this means that I'm only going to ever return these one time, and I won't end up processing the same email over and over and over again. So now that we're adding our label and our school message, there's one other thing I want to do. I want to go and I'm going to make this pretty. So once again, I went back into ChatGPT and I said, hey, turn this into a nice readable HTML for me. Something where I can easily see what comes out of here. And as we run this again, we see that it returns some HTML. Now, before we send this, we need to go ahead and ensure that our email type is set back to HTML, that we don't get all those divs and things like that showing up in our mailbox. We want the nice clean version. So we have it all updated to exclude any that are already processed. We're going to create a nice pretty HTML email. We're going to create a calendar event for anything that comes through, and we're going to go ahead and mark them as processed after each one goes through to ensure that we don't get any duplicates. It also saves our tokens from not having to process these same ones over and over again as well. So it actually will be cheaper to run. And we'll go ahead and we'll kick that off, let it run. And then let's go ahead and check our inbox and see. There's our upcoming school dates. Let's take a look. And a nice, pretty, clean, consolidated email. I even have it highlighting in red when there's actions required for me. We have all of our calendar events and everything, and we are good to go. The last thing I need to do is just go ahead and come in here and schedule it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that manual trigger at the beginning and just tell it to run every day at 4 p.m. Now, hopefully there'll be no more early morning surprises, missed tests, or forgotten practices. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please hit the like button. If you like this content, go ahead and subscribe for more like it. If you have any ideas for future topics that you'd like me to cover, please go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'll go ahead and put some links to some N8N content down in the description. I literally learned how to use N8N and build this workflow in a day. So don't be intimidated by it. It is not difficult at all to get off the ground and get up and running. I'm running it locally in Docker, but there's also different VSPs and you can run it directly from N8N themselves. Again, this isn't sponsored by N8N. It was just a pretty easy, clean platform to get up and running and create some agentic workflows with. But again, everything that we covered here, same information and things like that apply to any platform that you're using, whether you're coding it yourself or you're using Make or Zapier or Power Automate. It doesn't matter. It's all the same process, all the same flow. So as always, until next time, keep building, stay curious, and automate the boring parts.